a thumbs up so I can go. So, that passage that I read to you from Mark chapter 8, we've reached now the middle point of Mark's account of the life of Jesus of Nazareth. It's the middle point in every sense. 8 chapters have gone, 8 chapters to go. But more significantly, we are at the turning point. We're at the turning point in Mark's account of Jesus' ministry. On the point where that ministry takes on a new emphasis and a new direction. Up to this point, we've been seeing the evidence presented to enable a judgment to be made of who this Jesus really is. The case has been undeniable. He is both fully man and fully God. We've seen this presented to us as the 12 disciples have lived out alongside him and have been our eyes and ears in the matter. And it's so clear now. The answer is so clear. And Jesus has allowed Peter to make the declaration on behalf of all of them. Who do you say I am? You are the Christ. What then becomes immediately obvious to us is that though Peter knows this great truth, he still doesn't understand what it really means. He's still caught up in the old thinking about what Christ, the Messiah, remember it's the same word, about what Christ, the Messiah, would do when he appeared. And if as great a man as Peter can get it so wrong, then we need to be absolutely sure that we are not mistaken in our understanding of the Christ. And that's why I want us to look at this vital passage today before we continue with our studies in the rest of the book. The first thing I want you to notice is, first heading, what must be, must be. What must be, must be. The first change we notice is that Jesus now starts increasingly teaching the disciples rather than the crowd. This will be the normal pattern as the story progresses towards Jerusalem and to the cross. The crowd will be involved at times, but now his chief concern is that the disciples should be properly prepared for the role that he will require of them when he is no longer here but has returned to heaven. What does it mean to be the Christ? And verse 32 tells us that he now speaks plainly. He speaks plainly. The truth is not being hidden in parables now. He's speaking plainly. The Greek word is parrhesia, which literally means boldly or confidently. A bit like Yorkshiremen when they're talking about things. They speak boldly and confidently, sure of themselves. He's speaking in a way now that the meaning is not to be hidden. It's not to be hard to find. This is blunt, straightforward, and clear talk. Because unless the 12 understand this, then they can be of no help in his service. They cannot themselves be saved men, nor can they help others to find salvation. So surely that means that we need also to be totally clear at this point. We need to be totally clear if we are to have real salvation and if we are to be in a position to share the gospel with others. What he describes in verse 31 is a new teaching about Messiah. Not one who is coming to restore traditional Jewish teaching and dominance, but one who is coming to create an inclusive, spiritual kingdom that will be open to all peoples. The Messiah will not be the conquering hero of the Jewish nation, but the suffering servant that Isaiah prophesied about in that chapter 53 that we read a small quote from at the start of the service. Verse 31 says, "He began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the chief priests and teachers of the law, and that he must be killed, and after that, after 3 days, rise again." So can you see, he's saying that there are 3 things that must happen, 3 things that must be. He must suffer, he must be killed, and he must rise again. They must happen, not because he can't stop them from happening, not because others are in control, but because without them, salvation is not possible. He is to do these 3 things in the place of his people, those who will trust wholly in him. And really, this is where we begin to see how awful sin is. Sin is an offence against God. We are all sinners, and God, as the Holy One, is fully committed to punishing sin. Sin divides us from God and leaves us unfitted for his presence. And the punishment of sin involves suffering and death. And either we experience that for ourselves, or we need a perfect, sin-free substitute to take our place. And Jesus has shown himself to be the only possible candidate for that role. He must suffer, he must die in the place of his people, and he must rise again to confirm that the price is paid, that death is defeated, and salvation is available to all who will trust in him alone. What must be, must be. Peter couldn't understand it, but Jesus says this is what must happen. So let's look at Peter. Secondly, a human reaction. What Jesus has described here is revealing, startling, and contrary to all human wisdom. So much so that Peter can't get his head round it. His whole upbringing, his whole background is traditional Judaism. He expects Messiah to come, but to come as an overpowering, a man of national power who will restore political Israel to its previous dominance. And he can't get his head round the fact that that's not what Jesus has come to do. He can't contemplate what Jesus has described. And so Peter, being Peter, he feels the need to intervene. He knows and he believes that Jesus is the Christ, but is so very mistaken about what that means. He intervenes in his ignorance. He's sincere, he's well-meaning, and he is utterly wrong. That the Son of Man should die is unthinkable to Peter, but inevitable and right to Jesus. And so Peter earns from Jesus the most cutting rebuke that any man could ever face. Jesus compares his words to those of Satan. He says, "Get behind me, Satan." What Peter wants him to do is very reminiscent of Satan's tempting of Jesus in the wilderness, if you think back to that. And no doubt that is what Jesus is thinking of and wanting to remind them of as he so severely rebukes Peter. What a small step it is from the greatest declaration of truth, you are the Christ, to being Satan standing in the way of Jesus. So we need to remember that and not be too quick to give our opinions on matters of faith. We might be right at one point and very quickly wrong on something else. You see, the problem that Peter couldn't get his head round is that human thinking equates submission with failure. Human thinking says to submit is to fail. And it thinks that power is what brings success. And that's why so many people still try to tell us that, oh yes, Jesus was a good man, but he was beaten by circumstances. They say that the cross marks his defeat at the hands of evil men. Peter's thinking is understandable, something we might well sympathise with. But ultimately, it is totally wrong and had to be corrected for his own salvation and for his future service of the Lord. Learn from it, friends. Take heart from Peter, not in his failings, but in Christ's ability to rescue, to restore, and to reuse for great work for his kingdom. Remember, Peter is the likely source of this information for Mark's writing. Peter was the eyewitness account that Mark used in writing his gospel. What grace, what humility on Peter's part to be able to own up to his own failings, to tell Mark and have them recorded for future followers to see. Wouldn't most of us just want to cover it up and say, oh, please don't tell anybody that happened? And Peter tells Mark and Mark records it so that you and I 2,000 years later can learn from what happened. Be thankful that God can and does forgive. So let's make sure